Da-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum bum. Da-dum dum. Well, hello and welcome, whoever, wherever, whenever you are, whatever you're doing, why ever you're here, however you got here. If you're up in the snowy north, I don't envy you. I used to live up there. I know what a hard winter can be, and it can be nice. It can be beautiful if you're prepared for it. And I hope everyone watching this video, if you're in the snowy north, that you were prepared to be able to enjoy the beauty of the snow and not face hardship. And wherever else you are, I hope you're enjoying the autumn weather anyway, whatever it is, wherever you are. Okay, David Shurter is in the title of this one. I felt a little bad that I kind of threw a little bit of shade at him in a conversation on another stream. I popped in on Blazing Scars stream today. I wanted to, the thing is, when you go into the pocket, let's call it that, the people who are listening to all the defamation and crap that Terry Randolph, she has several. I mean, her legal name is some mixture of Teresa Joyce Randolph, and she uses different combinations. Terry Joyce is her most well-known professional name, but she's trying to build a new career and trying to base it on harassment, bullying, and blackmail as Terry Randolph, because Terry Joyce is her Hollywood comedian brand, and Terry Randolph is going to be her journalism brand, but she started out on the wrong foot with that. Anyway, this isn't really about her, it's about David Shurter. So I was in Blazing Scars stream because I saw an opportunity to correct some of the defamation that I've been up against lately on Terry Joyce's part. And I said something about, why does she keep going after David Shurter? He's just a guy who thinks people are trying to feed peanut butter to his dogs, and that was it. That was the extent. And I feel a little bad about that because David Shurter is far more important. I mean, he does go off on some strange tangents, and I've always said that there's only two possibilities about that man. I mean, I know that he did write a book that was being sold as nonfiction, and I believe he still presents it as nonfiction, and he bases his blog and his YouTube channel on telling everything as true story. He's telling his life story, and he's bringing a lot of other stuff into it. And I've always said there's only two possibilities. Either he was born with issues and he made it all up, or he really lived through the abusive, satanic childhood that he describes, in which case you can't expect him to be normal. Nobody would be normal after living through even half of what he has described. And I tend to believe that he is telling the truth most of the time when he's talking about his own experience, because a lot of it lines up with independently verifiable fact. And when he gets off on tangents where other people, they pull him into these arguments where he conflates identities and he believes somebody is actively after him when they're really not, there's a bunch of people who, unfortunately, are still trusted by Thomas Schoenberger, who do use he has shared his accounts with people that he thought were his good buddies. He was a much bigger part of the gaming world than he is now. He's much more involved with his music compositions and such like, and he still shows up in chats and exchanges insults with people in his postings. But so what? I mean, it's tit for tat in many ways. But before 2016 or 2017, back when he was involved with the Shadowbox project, which was a gamer business, and he was one of the founders of it, but he left it. It was during that period that he realized that what they were doing and what they were using him for as a partner was not something his conscience would allow him to do. And ever since then, you know, the problem is he continues to trust people in that circle. And it's like, hey, you know, we all trust people that we shouldn't. We all find ourselves in social relationships that, for one reason or another, we prefer to stay on the friendly side with somebody. Maybe we hope that they'll change, or maybe we just accept that life is strange and people are even stranger, and that's just the way it is. And I'm kind of inclined to that point of view, and I believe he is too. So David Shurter does have a tendency to really get hooked into fighting with individuals who are distracting him off his original mission, because there's nothing to be gained by fighting with people like Thomas Schoenberger. Even if Thomas Schoenberger were half as bad as they claim he is, there's still nothing to be gained by fighting with him, because he's not the problem. The problem is the satanic cultural structure that we know is real, that David Shurter does describe with credible foundation, founded in credible facts, that he's had direct experience with. And he believes that it is his mission to take it all down, and he's doing the best he can with what he has. And that's why he's important, because when it comes to the factual nature of these things, a person who presents things with all kinds of emotional embellishments, like believing that, you know, I think one of the characters he fights with is a guy who uses the name, or a person, could be a female for all I know, but somebody who uses the name Johnny Dub. He's accused a number of people of being that person. He seems mostly to believe that it's Lucian Greaves, and it might well be, because this whole game situation is part of the satanic structure. And it's unfortunate that David Shurter is entangled to the degree where he doesn't simply block, delete, and forget the unimportant people, while he continues to focus on the important things. Now, lately, he's talking and writing in his blog about things to do with members of his family. I think it's his stepmother or mother, I'm not sure. The woman named Joanne is a relative who he believes is working with Lucian Greaves, had worked with Lucian Greaves to get a family restraining order. And Terry Joyce is attacking him with the family restraining order that she claims this person, Joanne, who I think is his stepmother, I think that's how he refers to her. And Terry Joyce is making it a point to attack him with something that's really none of her business. First of all, restraining orders don't mean anything as far as the actual guilt of a person in any way, because anyone can go to a court, make any kind of wild claim, and especially if it's a family member, the restraining order will be granted while they say, hey, okay, we're going to grant a restraining order that you two need to stay away from each other. She needs to stay away from your house. She can't call you, talk to you, blah, blah, blah. But they set a date where you're supposed to come in and settle the argument. And if that passes without action, then it goes away. It's really meaningless. Nothing has been proven about anything. And this happens all the time. And then people like Terry Joyce come along and try to use it for blackmail. And as far as Lucian Greaves possibly working with his stepmother, I believe that's 100% probably true. Why? Because Lucian Greaves does have a relationship of some kind with the people who were selling David Shurter's book, who are well known to exploit and discredit and basically destroy people. They find people who have this kind of experience that he describes. They are sometimes, I don't know the history of how he wrote the book, but I do know that these people around this guy Neil Brick and Steve Hassan, the Boston anti-cult charlatan, I do know that they approach people who've been in the news or are somehow known to have some issues, and they do try to get them to write books that will serve their propaganda purposes. That's why, for a while, I treated Shurter's, the fact that he wrote the book as being possibly not so true. But at the same time, if you watch him over a period of time, you realize that there is a factual basis that survives regardless of how well he handles things, regardless of how badly entangled he gets in these stupid troll fights, because the troll fights continue to be set up by a structure that is based in the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. There's Blazing Scar, who's in a fight and feud with Terry Joyce right now. Joyce has been attacking her horrifically for at least 6 months. I mean, for a long time, but she's really been focused on her for at least 6 months. There's also a bunch that I had a very brief interaction with and then decided, no, they're not important to my situation, but they're part of the United Kingdom, the group that's in England and Ireland that works in conjunction with the American troll community. Both groups are part of a Jewish propaganda movement that's really, I believe, not mainstream Jew. New York Jewish community is heavily influenced by a weird cult. Some people call it the Lubavitchers. I think that's the traditional ethnic name for them, because you've got all different kinds of Jews. You've got Yiddish people who are like from Eastern Europe. You've got Sephardic Jews who are from the Mediterranean around Spain and Italy. You've got various kinds of Jewish populations in North Africa. China even has a Jewish, no, I'm thinking of the Muslims. No, they do. They have a Jewish population that dates back to the Silk Road, which is like the days of Marco Polo. So, you know, there are all these different groups. Well, the New York Jewish community is dominated by the Third Temple cult people, who are also dominated, just the same way as the South and the Bible Belt is in many ways dominated by the Christian identity cult. And both of those are part of the same cult. It's the same doomsday, apocalyptic, satanic cult running under the disguise of being Christian on the one hand, where it works in America to be Christian because that's our dominant ideology, or to be Jewish, which works with Israel, because that's obviously the dominant ideology there. And There's all kinds of political, geopolitical, economic shenanigans that, way above my pay grade, that keep Israel and the United States entangled. That's foreign policy stuff. I don't care about it. I live here at the lower levels. And at my level, the problem is the trolls. The trolls who can affect daily life for normal people. And I just want to say that David Shurter is worth watching, and it's worthwhile reading his blog if you can just ignore the unnecessary drama that gets injected into it by people like Terry Joyce, and take what he says about Thomas Schoenberger with at least a grain of salt, because half the time he's reacting to one of the profiles that the people that Thomas Schoenberger still sometimes calls friends. And Blazenskar's the same way. She's friendly with people in her chat. I mean, that doesn't mean they're really friends, but, there's congenial interaction between these people. And some of them are, in fact, impersonating others at times and never get caught. Frankly, I believe Marcia Stockton is behind at least one of the... There are these troll channels that are set up with Terry Joyce's images to keep goading her. And one of them, I can't think of which one it's called, but it uses a lot of Pepe the Frog. And it has Marcia Stockton's style all over it. And Marcia Stockton is somebody that Thomas Schoenberger trusts completely as a musical colleague, and she is a genuine musician, highly professional. They collaborate on things and have for several years, about 6 years at least, because she was introduced to Schoenberger by a guy named Matthew Chapman, who uses the name Babyfist. He's an extremely duplicitous manipulator, and Thomas Schoenberger trusts them both. So that's his business, I'm known to trust people who, have issues. But you just live your life, and you can't pick who's on the earth with you. You can't pick who's in your neighborhood with you. You can't even pick who's in YouTube with you. You can pick how far you interact with them. But if you count everybody as an enemy because there's something about their life that isn't trustworthy, and you ignore the parts of your own life that might be a little off, well, you end up like David Shurter, unfortunately, because that's what happens to him. Obviously, anyone with the kind of childhood he describes, which includes his having done some terrible things, which he openly has described, and said, look, I lived in this life. I was doing these things because when I was a teenager, this was normal behavior in my world. And nobody can escape the fact that that's all of us. No matter what kind of family you grew up in, when you were a child and a teenager, their behavior was normal, no matter how crazy it was. And if you were lucky enough to step away from it and see it from the outside, you realize that, oh my God, how could I have survived in such a thing? Other people don't grow up this way. But the ones who never step outside of that world never learn that. Now, get back to his stepmother Joanne and Lucian Greaves. The Satanic Temple has an elderly persons group called the Grey Panthers, which has tried to exploit elders, and people have seen that name. It was written up in the press, I don't know, back in the early 2000s, they looked like a slightly more radical AARP. You know, they didn't look like that big of a deal. I didn't like them because I knew they were associated with Lucian Greaves and the Satanic Temple. But they were just, to most people, they were just a liberal, you know, general kind of New Agey group of elders who, they did take on legal issues that, if I didn't know about their association with Satanic Temple, I would have probably supported them. They get into, and Lucian Greaves uses Lucian Greaves not as a person, but the Satanic Temple as a cult. That's one of its fronts, the Grey Panthers. And I think the Grey Panthers has appeared to be an independent organization. So it does not surprise me. It would not, let me put it this way, it would not surprise me if what David Shurter is saying about Joanne working together with Lucian Greaves to get a restraining order of some kind, it would not surprise me that that were true. Because it fits what the organization does, it fits what both characters do. Lucian Greaves has been heavily involved with the Neil Brick cult. The Neil Brick cult sets people, in fact, David Shurter's issues, where he believes that, like, people are aiming microwaves at his head and all this stuff, you know, if you've been watching YouTube for any length of time, there have been thousands of people with those same beliefs. As soon as anybody speaks about any kind of family background trauma that they want to start talking about how it fits into what's wrong with the world, I tell this from personal experience. The first thing that happens is your channel is flooded by people calling themselves targeted individuals, trying to repeat your story as if you are one of them, and they repeat all of Neil Brick's propaganda with the microwaves and the tinfoil helmet crap. And there are, I will say, thousands on the conservative side. There are tens and maybe even hundreds of thousands. There's tens of thousands at least of people who believe that that's really going on. They believe that the government does nothing but sit around pointing directed energy weapons at the homes of private citizens. Just because you can dig up patents and things, and there's been military research on this kind of stuff, well, you know, it doesn't mean they're doing it. It doesn't mean they're not. But you see what I'm saying. There are people like Neil Brick and that group and Steve Hassan who exploit that in order to discredit truth tellers, factual, experienced people who want to bear witness to what they have experienced so that society as a collective can address the problem. And so, yeah, I feel a little bad that I did, as I say, I threw a little bit of shade in his direction, but I was mostly focused on what we were talking about, which was not him, it was Terry Joyce. And he's worth watching. He's very much worth supporting, maybe not interacting with, because he draws people into his drama in a way that they didn't expect and don't need to be. But if you watch him and read his stuff and then look at what's going on, you start to see the outline of the actual structure by which this group of people who are heavily connected to Israel and to the New York Jewish community are deliberately undercutting and undermining the possibility that Americans of all kinds might simply start talking about the facts of what's been going on in this country. Because they are our enemy. They want to pull the United States down. The American Jewish community wants to destroy this country. And it might not be their fault. It might be that they've all been brainwashed by their good buddies over there in Israel, the Third Temple cult people. They've got their own mafia corruption going on that rivals every other mafia in this country and the world, because right now, if you look at world politics anywhere, that's what you see, all kinds of mafia groups wrecking Europe. Russia's not doing too well in some cases. I don't know what's real and what's not when I look at foreign news, but all of it's pretty bad. Well, anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. I got to get back to work on my stuff. And God bless David Shurter. I hope that he really gets some closure at some point soon. I hope that Terry Joyce really gets shut down in some way. I don't mean that her channel gets shut down, because I think we need to see people like her say what they have to say so that we can see how ridiculous they are. And we can see how people like David Shurter are manipulated and attacked and undermined and sabotaged, manipulated and exploited. That's the word I was looking for. Terry Joyce is going to shut herself down. And I will cheer it on when it happens. But in the meantime, read between the lines. When you see somebody like David Shurter, ask yourself, what kind of person would I be if I were born into the family setting that he was born into? You always have to ask yourself that old Native American question. Where would I be if I walked in that person's moccasins? And then you can separate the personal damage that has been done from the important facts that affect us all. And that's it for me for this evening. God bless some, have mercy on some, and to hell with the rest. You get to pick which group you're in. Denise Matteau, over and out.